Some moments in life don't feel important until they're all you can think about later. For Alyssa, that moment was the first morning she walked into Jefferson High. The halls smelled faintly of floor cleaner and cinnamon rolls from the cafeteria. Lockers clanged shut, and conversations floated in the air like she didn't belong to any of them. She hugged her books to her chest, not because they were heavy, but because it felt safer that way. 3 weeks into the new school, and she already knew the pattern, the sideways glances, the whispers that somehow sounded louder when she passed by. She thinks she's too good for us. Why is she always by herself? She kept her head down, pretending not to hear, but every word still stung. Alyssa was no stranger to being the new girl. Her mum's work had them moving more times than she could count. But this time felt different. There was a sharpness in the air she couldn't name, like a storm waiting to break. Still, she told herself the same thing every morning: just focus on the grades, keep your head up, make mum proud. That was the plan, and for a while it worked. Until the day she scored higher than anyone expected and someone decided she didn't deserve it. It happened on a Wednesday morning in math class. The smell of dry erase markers hung in the air as Mr. Daniels handed back the graded tests. Alyssa wasn't expecting anything special. She just wanted to keep her average high enough for the scholarship she'd been dreaming about. But when the paper landed on her desk, she saw the big red number at the top, the highest score in the class. For a split second, she felt a flicker of pride. Then she glanced up. Kayla, the girl everyone seemed to orbit around, was staring at her. Not the kind of stare you forget. It was the look people give when they feel like you've taken something that was theirs. Kayla had always been the one teachers praised, the one people whispered about in a good way. That day, the room felt colder. By lunchtime, the energy had shifted. Alyssa could hear the whispers at the table behind her in the cafeteria. Guess she's trying to show off. Must have gotten lucky. She kept her eyes on her tray, willing herself not to react. But the comments followed her down the hall, subtle enough that no teacher would notice, sharp enough that she felt every word. And it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, little things started happening. Someone would bump her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Her locker door would be left wide open when she knew she'd closed it. Her notebook went missing and showed up later with doodles covering the margins. Alyssa told herself to stay focused. This was nothing she couldn't handle, but deep down she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about a test score anymore. Someone had decided she needed to be put in her place, and they weren't going to stop at whispers. It started small, the kind of things you could almost convince yourself were accidents. A shoulder check in the hallway that nearly knocked her books out of her hands. A muttered comment she couldn't quite catch but knew was about her. A group of girls laughing too loudly when she walked by, like she was the punchline they didn't have to say out loud. Alyssa kept telling herself not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She'd been through worse moves, tougher schools. But here, the cruelty had a different edge. It wasn't just random, it was coordinated. One afternoon, she opened her locker to find her math notes crumpled inside, pages smeared with something sticky that smelled like orange soda. She spent the rest of class trying to copy the formulas from a classmate's notebook. Her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. That night at home, she thought about telling her mum. But her mum already worked 2 jobs, coming home late and exhausted. Alyssa couldn't bring herself to add another weight to her shoulders. Instead, she went to the school counsellor the next day, hoping for advice. Mrs. Thompson listened, nodding in all the right places, then said the words Alyssa dreaded. Sometimes the best thing you can do is ignore it. Focus on your studies and it will pass. Alyssa walked out feeling smaller than when she'd walked in. It wasn't going to pass. She could feel it in her gut. They were just getting started, and sooner or later they'd push it too far. By Friday, the week had already worn her thin. Alyssa moved through the lunch line in autopilot, sliding a tray down the metal rail, choosing a sandwich and an apple without even tasting the idea of food. All she wanted was a quiet corner where she could eat in peace. She spotted an empty table by the far wall and headed for it, eyes down, steps steady. Halfway there, Kayla stepped into her path like she'd been waiting. Two of her friends flanked her, forming a wall that stopped Alyssa cold. The noise of the cafeteria seemed to fade, replaced by the pounding in her ears. Going somewhere? Kayla's voice was light, but carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Alyssa didn't answer. She shifted her tray, looking for a gap to pass through. Kayla stepped closer. "You think you're better than us?" she asked, her smile tight. "Still nothing." Alyssa's grip on her tray tightened. She'd learnt the hard way that sometimes silence was the only shield she had. But Kayla wasn't looking for silence. Without warning, Kayla shoved her shoulder hard. The tray jolted and Alyssa's lunch, the sandwich, the apple, the milk carton, tumbled to the floor in a messy splatter. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by scattered laughter. For a second, Alyssa just stared at the food on the tile, the smell of spilled milk mixing with the metallic tang of humiliation. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, waiting to see what she'd do. And somewhere deep inside, something shifted. For a moment, Alyssa stayed frozen, her eyes fixed on the mess at her feet. She could hear the snickers, the whisper laughs, the squeak of sneakers as kids leaned closer to watch. Her cheeks burned, but it wasn't from shame, not this time. It was something else, something she hadn't felt in a long while. She set the tray gently on the nearest table, straightened her shoulders, and looked right at Kayla. The chatter in the cafeteria dipped, the way it does when everyone senses something's about to happen. "You can spill my lunch," Alyssa said, her voice steady, "but you don't get to decide who I am." It wasn't loud, but it carried. A few tables away, forks paused mid-air. Kayla blinked, her smirk faltering for just a second. Alyssa didn't wait for a reply. She stepped past her, picking up the apple that had rolled a few feet away, and walked toward the exit. Every step felt heavier and lighter all at once, heavy with what she'd just done, light with the relief of finally saying something. By the time she pushed open the cafeteria doors, her hands were trembling. But her mind was clear. She was done letting them decide the rules. She had no idea that from a quiet corner of the room someone had filmed the whole thing, every word, every glance, every bit of it. By the next morning, Alyssa could feel the difference the moment she walked into school. It wasn't just the usual glances anymore. It was longer stares, hushed conversations that stopped when she got close, and a few people looking at her with something that almost felt like respect. She didn't understand why until she checked her phone between classes and saw it. The video. Someone had caught the exact moment she stood up to Kayla, her words clear as day, the milk spreading across the floor at her feet. It had already been shared dozens of times, with captions ranging from Queen Energy to Don't Mess with Alyssa. She wanted to disappear into the floor. Attention was the last thing she'd asked for. But before she could think too much about it, a voice came over the intercom during fourth period, calling her to the principal's office. Her stomach dropped. The walk down the hallway felt endless. She half expected a lecture about causing a scene. But when she stepped inside, Principal Harris wasn't angry. He gestured for her to sit, his expression calm. "I saw the video," he said, folding his hands on the desk, "and I think you handled yourself with a lot of courage." Alyssa didn't know what to say. She mumbled something about not wanting trouble, but he shook his head. "You didn't create the trouble," he said. "You responded to it. And I think your voice could make a difference here. Next week, we're holding a student assembly about respect and kindness. I'd like you to speak." The idea hit her like a wave, terrifying, impossible, but also right. Her mum's words echoed in her mind. "Your strength is in your truth." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it." She didn't notice it at the time, but saying yes in that office would change far more than just her own story. The gym smelled faintly of polished wood and popcorn from the concession stand that hadn't been used since basketball season. Rows of folding chairs faced the small stage, and the low hum of students talking bounced off the high walls. Alyssa stood just behind the curtain, her palms damp, her heartbeat loud enough to drown out the noise. She'd practiced her speech in front of her bedroom mirror for 3 nights straight, whispering the words until they felt like they belonged to her. But now, staring at the microphone a few steps away, every line seemed to scatter like leaves in the wind. Principal Harris's voice came through the speakers, welcoming everyone and explaining why they were there. Alyssa caught fragments: respect, community, standing up, before she heard her name. The applause was polite but curious, the kind that says, "Who is she and why is she speaking?" She walked to the podium, her legs stiff but steady. For a moment, she just looked at them, the same faces that had whispered about her in hallways, the ones who had laughed, and the ones who had stayed silent. She took a slow breath, just like her mum used to tell her when she was nervous. "I didn't plan on being here," she began, her voice carrying more than she expected. "I didn't plan on spilling my lunch in front of half the school either. But sometimes you don't get to choose the moment you speak up. The moment chooses you." She told them about moving from place to place, about never really feeling like she fit anywhere, about her mum working late nights so she could chase a dream bigger than the next town they lived in. And she told them what it felt like to be pushed, laughed at, and made to feel small. Not just by words, but by silence. Her voice wavered once, but she didn't look away. "I'm not here to make anyone feel bad," she said. "I'm here because I think we all deserve to feel safe walking through these halls, every single one of us." When she stepped back from the mic, the gym was quiet for half a heartbeat, and then the applause came, louder than she expected, rising until it filled the whole room. Somewhere in the crowd, she saw a teacher wipe their eyes, and in that moment she realised something. Her voice hadn't just been heard, it had landed. The assembly ended, but the feeling didn't fade. By the time Alyssa left the gym, a few students she barely knew were stopping her in the hallway just to say, "That was brave," or "I've been through the same thing." It was strange, hearing kindness from voices she'd only known as background noise before. That afternoon, Principal Harris caught up with her outside the library. "You started something in there," he said with a small smile. "Don't let it end with one speech." He suggested she create a space for students to share their own experiences, a safe place where people could be heard without fear of being mocked or ignored. By the end of the week, they had a name: Voices Matter. They chose the name after remembering something Alyssa had said during her speech: "Your voice matters, even if it shakes." The first meeting was in an unused classroom near the art wing. Alyssa half expected no one to show up, but when she opened the door, there were already 5 students waiting. They sat in a loose circle, some fidgeting, others quiet, all of them carrying the same look. That mix of curiosity and guarded hope. One by one they spoke. A freshman talked about being teased for his stutter. A junior admitted she'd stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria because of the stairs. Another said nothing at all, just listened with eyes that seemed to say, "Finally, someone understands." Alyssa didn't pretend to have all the answers. She just listened, nodded, and made sure everyone left knowing they weren't alone. As the room emptied, she noticed a folded note left on one of the chairs. In small, neat handwriting it read, "Your voice gave me mine." She tucked it into her notebook, knowing this was only the beginning. It was a rainy Thursday when Alyssa walked into the small classroom for the weekly Voices Matter meeting. The air smelled faintly of wet coats and paper, and the usual circle of chairs was already forming. She was halfway through greeting a sophomore who'd just joined when the door creaked open again. Kayla stepped inside. For a moment, the room went still. A few heads turned, some eyes narrowing, others just wide with surprise. Alyssa felt her pulse pick up, but she kept her voice even. "There's a seat if you want one." Kayla nodded and took a chair near the back, avoiding Alyssa's gaze. The meeting went on. A senior talked about transferring schools and feeling invisible. Another student shared how online comments had wrecked their confidence. Alyssa listened, responded, kept the conversation flowing. But she could feel Kayla there, silent and fidgeting, like someone working up the courage to speak. When the last student finished, Kayla cleared her throat. "I know I'm the last person who should talk here," she began, her voice quieter than Alyssa had ever heard it. "I didn't think about what I was doing to you, or to anyone really. I just didn't see it. but I see it now, and I'm sorry." A few students shifted in their seats, glancing between them. Alyssa met her eyes. There was no smirk this time, no wall of bravado, just a girl who looked smaller than the role she'd played. "Thank you for saying that," Alyssa replied. She didn't add anything more. Forgiveness, she knew, wasn't instant, but maybe this was a place to start. Kayla gave a small nod, almost like a promise. And for the first time since that day in the cafeteria, Alyssa felt the air between them soften. By spring, Voices Matter had outgrown the little art wing classroom. The group met in the library now, the tables pushed aside to make room for more chairs. New faces appeared every week, freshmen, seniors, even a few teachers who came just to listen. Alyssa never thought a single moment in the cafeteria could lead here, but looking around the room, she knew it had been worth every shaky step. Kayla kept coming back. At first, she sat quietly, listening more than she spoke. Then she began sharing her own stories about the pressure to be liked, the way cruelty had become a shield she didn't know how to put down. Alyssa didn't pretend everything was fixed between them, but she could see the edges softening. Sometimes change didn't look like an apology, it looked like someone showing up again and again. The last meeting before summer break, the group went around sharing what the year had meant to them. When it was Alyssa's turn, she hesitated, feeling the weight of 100 small moments, the note left on the chair, the quiet nods in the hallway, the way her mum's eyes lit up when she told her about the club. "I used to think strength was just surviving," she said. "But now I know it's also about making sure someone else doesn't have to go through it alone." When the meeting ended, she lingered by the door, watching the students spill into the hall. It felt like a lifetime since that lunch had spilled across the cafeteria floor. But maybe that was the point. They had all come a long way. Kayla paused on her way out. "See you next year," she said, and for the first time it didn't sound like a challenge. Alyssa smiled, knowing this wasn't just her story anymore. It belonged to everyone who had found the courage to speak, to listen, and to stand together. Lesson: true strength isn't in throwing punches. It's in standing tall, speaking your truth, and using your voice to inspire others. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for that. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you again soon here on Rain Inside.